Wow. Almost otherworldly. So, w- how did it pose as a problem to you? Like, did it start when you were doing the drugs or way before that?
Well, that's interesting. That's an interesting question that has a couple of questions. One is if I never done the drugs, I was not only doing like high level marijuana, but also like hallucinogens like LSD and mescaline and a little cocaine, mushrooms. I was doing everything at Dartmouth. So basically, one question is if I hadn't done the drugs, then would I have gotten sick? And that's sort of like a moot point because I did what I did. So
Mm.
I don't regret my life. So, but the second thing is that the the drugs were like a complicating factor, and I feel that even my first doctor said you can smoke pot till it comes out of your ears, Dale, but don't do LSD again. So basically, I feel that the LSD is basically the thing that threw the tipping point over into psychosis.
Welcome to your Wordless Podcast, the space where we redefine success, self worth, and transformation. I am Nick Yaras, the soul centered architect of transformation, helping you unlock your highest potential and build a legacy beyond limits. Now, whether it is self mastery, career breakthroughs, or wealth creation, this is where change begins. Now, let's dive in.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate you having me. Just because schizophrenia is a very serious subject, but it's one that is basically lost in ignorance and darkness at this point. And I feel that I feel blessed that I can bring my message to as many people as possible because ultimately I feel I'm speaking for like the great majority of those with the illness who can't speak for themselves.
Thank you, Dale. I love the work that you're doing right now and for just sharing your story. For somebody that doesn't know in the corners of the world of in Southeast Asia, I'm benefiting from this knowledge as well. So Dale, can you share with us what was it like growing up as a Dale E. Walsh?
Well, actually, I had a great childhood. I there was a lot of trauma, but I always dealt with it. What happened was I was born in Midland, raised in Abilene, Texas, until the age of 9, and then my mother divorced and remarried, and I moved from Abilene, Texas, to Midtown Manhattan. Which people say that must have been some sort of culture shock, and it was, but I adjusted, and obviously, life in Texas would have been a lot different than life in New York, but I went to boarding school at the age of 14, uh, graduated from my boarding school. I went to Dartmouth College, got involved. Well, actually, I started getting involved in drugs in high school at my boarding school, but I got very heavily involved in drugs at Dartmouth. And the summer after my freshman year, I was very academically successful. I had like a B plus A minus average in upper level courses as a freshman. But ultimately, all the drugs caught up. So I found myself, to make a long story short, I was detained and taken to the infirmary by the campus police. 2 days later, I was in a mental hospital in New York City for 13 weeks, and then I came to a psychiatric program in New Jersey for 5 years.
That must have been a journey for you. Okay, for those people like myself tuning in maybe for the first time, can you share what is schizophrenia exactly? And what does it
So
look like?
this is something that people have argued over for ever since the diagnosis was created. There's an interesting story about early psychiatrist who was dealing with schizophrenia, and someone said to him, "What's your cure for schizophrenia?" And he said, That's the disease for which there is no cure, right? And the reporter said yes, and they said, well, why should I try to cure that?
Wait,
So
what? What did you say?
why should I try to cure schizophrenia? Because it was general knowledge that was incurable.
Mm.
So this is basically, the attitude that it has dominated psychiatry for, at least the 50 years since I've been involved in the system, is this idea that schizophrenia is basically incurable. All you can hope to do is like maybe live in a assisted home and and go to a day program. That was basically the mindset when I first got taken away. And
Mhm.
I would ask my doctor, I'd say, why am I here? And he'd say, well, if you broke your leg, you'd come to the hospital, right? And I said, yes. And he said, well, you broke your brain. And not only did this resonate negatively with me for the next 30 years, but it's a complete miss because in the 50 years since I got taken away, there's been so much research in the neuroscience and the brain and everything, and there is no such thing as a incurable mental illness. So, in answer to your question, people say, "What is schizophrenia?" You talk to professionals, and they say, "Well, it's typified by hallucinations and delusions and like fanciful thoughts that are outside reality and everything." I've come up with a definition which I think basically sums up schizophrenia very well and is comprehensible. You don't need psychobabble to understand it. And that definition is: a schizophrenic is living in a reality that was not conceived on earth.
Wow. Almost otherworldly. So, w- how did it pose as a problem to you? Like, did it start when you were doing the drugs or way before that?
Well, that's interesting. That's an interesting question that has a couple of questions. One is if I never done the drugs, I was not only doing like high level marijuana, but also like hallucinogens like LSD and mescaline and a little cocaine, mushrooms. I was doing everything at Dartmouth. So basically, one question is, if I hadn't done the drugs, then would I have gotten sick? And that's sort of like a moot point because I did what I did. So
Mm.
I don't regret my life. So, but the second thing is that the the drugs were like a complicating factor, and I feel that even my first doctor said you can smoke pot till it comes out of your ears, Dale, but don't do LSD again. So basically, I feel that the LSD is basically the thing that threw the tipping point over into psychosis.
Are you stuck in a job that you don't love, feeling like you're meant for more? It is not in your head, it is in your soul. I am Nick Yaras and I help high achievers like you break free from burnout, rewire self doubt, and build a life aligned with purpose through coaching, hypnotherapy, and soul activation. Because let's face it, real wealth isn't just about money, it is about aligned and happy heart, mind, and soul. Now, remember, you are worthy and you are enough. Let's transform your life together. Visit www.thenicknarasholisticlifestyle.com to begin. Right. Okay. And how did you navigate college after that? Like, I know in part of
I
your introduction,
actually got taken away from college.
yeah, and then after that, you went back in and then you graduated cum laude, I think, or magna cum laude in English literature. Yeah. So what was the journey like? Like, what was your hero's journey?
Well, my hero's journey was one thing I like to talk about is agnosognosia, which is it's a term taken from neurology, but basically it's ANASOGNOSIA, agnosognosia, and it's a term that's been adopted by psychiatry from neurology for stroke victims who can't comprehend there's something wrong with their brain. So basically, and they find it affects as many as 70 to 80% of people with severe mental illness. So that means, so the analogy I use is if you hold a book up to a blind person and ask him to read it, he's not going to be able to do it. But and agnosia for mental illness is sort of the same thing. The person can't see that he's mentally ill, and
Mm.
therefore, he won't take medication. He's not likely to take medication. He's going to refuse to see a doctor because nothing's wrong with him. And then that's going to cause the swirl of, well, you people are crazy. I'm the only sane one and everything. So agnosia is like a major problem in psychiatry that people just don't know about, but it's essential to understand because I was in serious agnosia for 10 years. Basically, what happened at Dartmouth was I came up with a joke, which was, "Hi, I'm God." And then, how could God be 5'8"? This was the punchline. So, I was like walking around campus telling everybody my joke when the campus cops came and like took me away and everything. The point is that for 10 years, I went to the program. I was in the program for 5 years. I got my own apartment. I've been on my own for 44 years. But I went back to school and it took a lot of social readjustment getting back into because after 5 years in a psychiatric program where everybody focuses on problems in psychiatric situations and everything to like make the transition back to just like being a normal college student, that took a lot of time. But as for how I made the transition, it was all the whole process has been a learning process. So when I got taken away from Dartmouth, I went to my parents' apartment, and the next day I went to a nice building, and I met with the doctor, and the doctor said, "Would you sign this?" We talked, and he said, "Would you sign this?" So I said, "Sure," because my mother told me to sign it. So I signed it. We got up. My parents go left. I go left to follow them, and Dr. Cohane says, "No deal, you come with me." So basically, I got taken to a locked ward for the next 13 weeks. I mean, I
Mm.
would have this, I'd have, I could get passes, but basically, I was on a locked ward for the next 13 weeks. So, but in answer to your question, just the process. What I was going to say is that when my parents went left and I went left to follow them, and the doctor said, "No, you come here." I don't know if you know anything about LSD, but one of the ideas about LSD is to go with the flow. So that's basically what I did. I just went with the flow. And that's how I ended up in Hackensack for the last 50 years, and so but the transition back to school, it was difficult at times, but I never tried to hide my diagnosis. So it made things easier. People either accepted me as a schizophrenic, as someone with a mental situation, or and they could take my choice, and it didn't bother me one way or the other. But as I grew and grew in the school, I made more and more friends until finally, for 10 years, I was the spirit of the campus after I graduated.
Wow. Okay. I mean, the obvious follow up for me because I'm curious. So, how was the relationship with your parents, or how then, or if they're still, around
Well,
now?
actually, I have five parents, but I have my blood father and his wife. That's my stepmother, and they had two daughters. And then I have my real sister and my mother, who's my blood father and my mother's same. So that's my sister. And then my mother also married a third time. They had a daughter by that marriage, and also the judge, who was my adopted father, had two daughters by his first marriage. His wife died of a brain tumor. So I say my sisters are like an Olympic event, Nick. There's three halves, two steps, and one reel.
Wow. And do you still keep in contact with these people, with family?
Uh, well, basically, my parents died. All my parents died before like 2015.
Oh,
I
I'm
was
so
very
sorry.
close to. I was very close with my mother and my stepfather. My stepfather lived to 102. He was born 4 months before the Titanic, and he died in 2014. So he
Wow.
basically saw the whole 20th century, you know. So,
Yeah.
but so the only real sister I keep in touch with is my real sister, and I try to keep in touch with my other sisters, but the two stepsisters of the judge basically are out of my life. I haven't had anything to do with them for 40 years. But and then my other sisters, I try to keep in touch, but they never return my calls. So, what can I do?
Okay. So, Dale, what about romantic connections? Like, was it difficult for you as somebody who's diagnosed with schizophrenia on,
I
or were
I
there like
I,
were there attempts to like, because I mean we're humans, right? We all crave connection, and
well, I think actually it was more difficult on the people that I went out with than the people than myself, because I just be myself, but people were like,
right, they couldn't get past that.
right. But
Okay.
did have I have had romantic situations in my life, and to tell you the truth, I've had like a 5 year long distance relationship for the last 5 years, and and we talk, we text every night for 2 to 3 hours and everything. And this is after 5 years. It's I trust in the Lord. That's really where my foundation is. I just trusted in Jesus. I trusted in the Lord that eventually someone would show up, and then basically out of nowhere, Rose did, and I'm just praying, to keep it going.
Hi, I'm Nick Nieras, your host of the Your Worthless podcast. Now, if these real raw stories hit home, don't wait. Please follow, like, and subscribe my Spotify and YouTube. For bite-sized inspirational reels, follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Don't wait. Your transformation starts today. Thank you, and bye for now. I love that for you. Sending a little prayer for you and Rose. Okay, Dale. Okay, so we're gonna move to the recovery from schizophrenia. Now you coach families,
Right.
right? So what does recovery from schizophrenia look like?
Well, that's just to clarify, I mentor the family caregivers, not the
Not
actual.
the actual person. Yes. Yes.
So, so basically, for what I want to do in my mentoring is to be able to. This is just something I came up with in the last week or two, but basically, it's sort of like approach things where you say to the family members who are obviously I mean, if they hire me, they're obviously very frustrated. They don't know what to do and everything. And the first thing, I should explain the Live Love program, which is which is a part of. So Live Love is an anagram. It stands for learn, integrate, validate, explore, and then listen, observe, value, and express. And that's like the 8 step program that I take people through with my program. So every letter has a Zoom call, and we just build upon the letter and build from there. So as to what recovery from schizophrenia, I mean, for some people, it's like finding a group home or finding someplace to stay and staying out of jail and not being homeless. I mean that's the bottom line for a lot of people for severe
Mm-hmm.
mental illness. But really recovery, I mean in my own case I say recovery is the definition of schizophrenia, shattered mind. That's what the Greek means. Schizophrenia means shattered minds. So, in my view, in terms of my definition of a schizophrenic is living in a reality that wasn't conceived on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
In my context, recovery is, and I call this a genius, is a schizophrenic who has integrated his or her vision into the matrix, into like the social matrix in which they live. So that's really what how I consider recovery. I mean, that's how I look at myself. Because even though I've been dealing with it for 50 years, it's actually only in the in the last probably 2.5 weeks that I've actually gotten out of my agnostignosia. And after 50 years, I popped the balloon of my belief that I was God. And
Wow.
and so basically that exploded, and that leaves me as Dale. But Dale, 50 years after being taken away from Dartmouth College for being psychotic, whereas actually I feel that now I'm liberated to be the Dale who I would have been had I never been taken away from Dartmouth.
Wow. It must have been a journey for you. I just want to say congratulations.
Appreciate that, and I feel very fortunate. As I say, the Lord. I started out by saying I was God, and my whole journey has been an exploration into like what that really means in personal terms. And what I realized in the last 2 weeks is that it means that what it means that not only are we all part of God, but it also means um, that my personality is what God wants me to show. Not He doesn't want me to be Him. God doesn't want me to be God. God wants me to be Dale. And so therefore my new mantra for the next 20 years is forget you wherever Dale forget you wherever God Dale. So but ultimately the liberating thing is the just like this ability, this sort of like popping a champagne on the return to the true identity of myself, that ultimately I deluded myself, maybe because of drugs, into believing.
Adele, I just want to commend you and just want to say thank you for coming out here, speaking on podcasts and sharing your story. Some people they may some may still be in very severe mental health or mental illness and they don't know where to seek help. Now the internet is wide and vast, but still for you to come up, there's actually there's courage in there. So thank you. And you are coaching families with members who are schizophrenic themselves, and that tells something. Exactly, you're living out your mantra. Forget that you're God. Just be Dale and live out the personality, the characteristics of a God, of
Well,
God.
one thing I figured out, Nicolette, is when I figured out I wasn't God, I figured people would ask me, well, do you feel like you wasted your life chasing this delusion that you were God?
Uh-huh.
And my answer to that is actually, I can't think of a much better way of living life.
You see, that's the thing with us, right? It always comes back to why we did certain things in the first place. It's a full circle moment.
Right,
Like right? And the fact that it doesn't matter. Time is a construct. And well, now I'm getting very spiritual here. It is past, present, and future is actually the same now. There's no past, there's no future. It is actually just now. So
right,
you thinking of that somewhat means that you probably thought of that. You're probably way ahead or advanced that you thought that you had to be God, but actually the whole lesson of the whole premise of you being on earth or at least on this 3D plane is to realize that okay, you gotta let go of the narrative, but just to live out those very values that you practice as a faithful person.
right.
And you showed that very compassionately towards others as well. And thank you for that, Dale.
Well, one thing, this is just a schizophrenic equation that I came up with, but
Okay.
it might help people when they think about God and Jesus and everything. The equation is Jesus equals God squared equals Dale cubed, and the idea is that you can put any name for Dale. So everybody has a mathematical relationship to God through that equation. So Jesus equals God squared equals Dale cubed it, and you could put Nick.
Wow.
So
Wow, that's a great equation. I would want to use it. Jesus equals to what was it? God squared, and then
it's
equivalent,
Jesus, who is like the living incarnation,
right?
God squared, who's the Father but unmanifest, equals
Yes.
who's a human.
Is a
Dale
human.
cubed.
Oh, fantastic! Thank you for breaking that down for me. Okay, I'm gonna keep that. I'm gonna keep that in the show notes. Well, thank you for that, Dale. Okay, now you have been mentoring people for how long, and what has been your greatest challenge so far?
Well, I've been to be perfectly honest, Nick, I haven't been mentoring that many people because I haven't been able to find people who have the courage to come out
Yes.
and say, I'm in this situation. Can you
Hmm.
help me? You know,
Yeah,
that's really been like the big obstacle for me for my business is like just like reaching people who I can help who will admit that they need the type of help that I can.
that's right.
But basically I use the live love method. We the goal is to well what I'm going to say is that at the beginning is one thing at the first session, one thing I try to impress on people is that the person your loved one has already changed. You're the one who has to change.
Because if you're the one caring for somebody who's diagnosed with that illness, you might be in that denial stage that I think he or she can be cured, and therefore I must, or they're just ashamed if
Well,
their loved ones are.
as they say, recovery is always an option. That I mean, I think everybody has potential to be cured.
Yes.
But they need to. I mean, I quote four things that are necessary: patience, love, faith, and tolerance. And
Mm.
those are like the four basic traits that I feel I try to instill in my clients is this patience, faith, hope, and love. I'm sorry. Patience, faith, hope, and love. And if you can integrate those things into your caregiving, then not only will your communication improve, but the more important thing is, and this is really why I conceived this is I want to stop people, caregivers, from having this codependence on their loved one that's stealing their lives and the joy that they can have because
Yeah.
they're so concerned about their loved ones. It ripples, especially when a family has like more than like three people, when there's more than a mother, father, and a son or daughter. So, but just to be able to like help people understand and communicate with their loved ones, but also to make sure that they reinforce their own self esteem and their own self worth
I
rather
want
than
to talk about, yes, I want to talk about live love method, Dale. Can you break it down for us, please?
okay. Well, it's so basically it's eight lessons.
Mm-hmm.
Live, integrate, validate, explore, listen, observe, value, and express. So basically the idea is that every session, so just to take an example, learn.
Yeah.
So first session is just like get to know each other. Hopefully we will have had like a pre-call or something so we can get right into the program. But learn is to like not only learn about each other, introduce ourselves and everything, but also to learn about the loved one that you're taking care of, what your ideas of caregiving are. What are your biggest obstacles? And I think the biggest obstacle at this point is the system, at least in the United States, is completely broken. I mean, people, you know, they 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 can't get care. I did a advocacy boot camp for severe mental illness and had 12 sections, and every section is like a critical point, like where people just aren't getting the help. And even if they do get in some place where they might be able to get help, they aren't, you know, there's no adequate help. So that's and as I mentioned before, agnosognosia is a major problem because if you don't think you have anything wrong with you, then you aren't going to get the help that you need.
So, okay, say they come up. So I'm giving like an analogy. Say somebody comes up to you and say, "Oh, I have this. A family member has been diagnosed with this." How would you take them through that whole process, and how long will it take in terms of the coaching? And then that's question number one. And question number two would be, what happens if at some point that loved one that has been diagnosed refuse treatment? What
Well,
would you tell them?
that's one of the questions that we will work together over.
Mm,
Uh, there's a book called "I'm Not Sick and I Don't Need Help" by this guy, by a doctor named Dr. Javier Amador, and it's a story of his interaction with his agnosognotic brother for 17 years. And he gives like ideas about how to communicate better. He has like a program acronym LEAP, which is listen, empathize, ally, and partner. That's his approach. Yeah, two questions. Do you remember what the questions were? I'm sorry, I got
Oh, the second question would be, what happens if that loved one is refusing treatment?
Well, that's one of the major problems that I deal with, and I'm not above bribery. I mean, people say this might be unethical and everything, but say someone's not taking his medication or he's not taking showers and his body. I mean, this happens a lot. A lot of people with severe mental illness hate showers. And so basically, if they smoke, that's an opening because cigarettes and schizophrenia are very tied up together. In fact, when I went to
Mm.
my pulmonologist one time, I told her that I quit smoking after 35 years. I just quit overnight, but I said, "Yeah, I quit smoking." And her jaw literally goes, and she says, "What?" I said, "Yeah, I quit smoking." And she says, "I've never heard of a person with your diagnosis giving up smoking." So
Yeah.
bearing that in mind, if your loved one is like resisting something that you feel is essential, like then you don't have to do this with a pack of cigarettes, but say, I'll give you a pack of cigarettes. I'll give you 3 packs of cigarettes a week if you take a shower 5 days a week. If or I'll make you your favorite dish lasagna if you take your medication for the week. It has to be some sort of like reward and punishment. I mean,
Mm.
punishment not so much, but reward to entice the person to take the things that he naturally is rebelling against.
A person who has been diagnosed with schizophrenia or other severe mental illness, I know it's different. I don't know much, but it's different from bipolar. It's different.
Right.
Yeah. And so schizophrenia, it's something that you mentioned, it's hallucinating and thinking that the reality is not, it's not here, it's not on earth. And so
No,
what?
I didn't say that it's not, reality's not on earth. I'm saying he's thinking in a way that was not conceived on earth. There's a big
Okay,
difference.
it's thinking in a way that is not conceived on earth. Okay, because of that, because it's in a psychosis state. And okay, I don't know if this is appropriate, if you can really talk about it, but do you know that when you're actually about to go into an episode, like how would it feel like?
When I was in the program, I was hospitalized 9 times. So that the doctor would basically put me in, and I agree to go. Just because I would get intense, and people would like start freaking out, and he couldn't put the whole program in the hospital, so he put me in the hospital, and let things chill out. I've been hospitalized 15 times. The last 6 times, I admitted myself to the hospital because I knew I was psychotic. I had the self-awareness to know I was psychotic. So I put myself in the hospital and I got out. But, that type of self-awareness, comes. I mean, when I was in the program, I was doing 3 individual and 2 group sessions a week. So it was a very intensive therapy. So, even though I was in agnosignosia, even as I said, it took me 10 years before I really got out of agnosignosia. But, you know, even though I was in agnosignosia, I was like in therapy, but I saw nothing wrong with saying I was God. I mean, to me, it was just something that was part of me, and that's why it was a delusion. It wasn't like a false belief or something, because a delusion is something that's at the very foundation of your identity. And actually, my delusion, I had a vision of the world being imploded in a thermonuclear holocaust in 1984, 10 years after I was taken away. I called that the death of Dale. And the death of Dale was really the beginning of my
Excuse me.
reflection,
Thank
was
you.
really the beginning of my recovery, because that's the point where I saw how crazy I'd been saying I was God all those years. But it still took me 40 years after the death of Dale to get to the point where I am now, where I've popped the balloon of thinking I'm God and I'm back to being Dale.
How important is faith to you?
Extremely. My whole journey has been an exploration of my faith. I mean, even well, for the last since 2004, I've been going to church basically every week. But now I'm getting over religiosity, and I'm sort of like trying to look beyond church to find real essence of Jesus and everything. But
I love that.
ultimately, uh, ultimately, faith has been the very core of why I've survived, because I couldn't have done. I mean, I've just been in so many situations where, God bless me, and I've lost like so many, basically all my best friends in my life before my present one died. So it's just like, I'm just fortunate to be here, and I feel that my faith is one thing that has really like sustained me, but also given me the right to continue to exist, because when I had that vision of the world being imploded, it really was like it was like a pure ego death. My delusion died. Basically, I had to die because my delusion had to die. Dale had to die because the delusion had to die.
It was unlearning to relearn who you are again.
Right.
So, what kind of support? How do you keep yourself entertained? Like, do you have a community that you hang out with online or in person? Or
I have communities, and I write every day. I have a lot of projects. I'm part of more than more than 2 or 3 groups that I attend like weekly, if not daily, and everything. So I but one thing I've learned in 50 years is everybody has 4 hours, and all you got to do is get through 24 hours and you get another chance.
boy, that was the message I needed today. Among all of the beautiful messages that you've said through this interview, that was a good one. Thank you. Thank you, Dale. What is one piece of advice you'd give to your clients?
Respond, don't react.
Respond,
Take
don't
it,
react.
and instead, because if you're dealing with someone with schizophrenia or psychosis, they can say very triggering things. They can be they can be totally psychotic and say things they don't know what they're saying, and you know, so therefore, that's one of the basic foundations of what I teach is react or respond, don't react. And if you feel you are reacting, just take a breath or two and answer with a question. So if someone says to you, I mean, just as an example, if you had a schizophrenic son who said to you, "You are my mother. You're the mother of demons." That that would be like sort of like the type of thing where a mother would say, how could you say that? And reaction is, and it's just going to escalate. So,
Yes.
but instead of saying that, saying, just taking a second and saying, why do you say that? Why do you say that? I've tried to be the best mother you could have, but also I just want to know where you're coming from that you think that. And so initiate a dialogue and really talk and start a dialect instead of just reacting and escalating the situation.
You mentioned you have some projects that you are working on right now. So what are you working on currently?
Well, actually, I just got a new mission from God about 3 days ago, and that mission is write a write an explanation in poetry of schizophrenia that the masses can understand. To
Oh, that's
just
beautiful.
just explain schizophrenia in ways that people can understand. So
Yeah.
that's I've started. Actually I have an archive of 5,000 poems, so I probably have like 1,000 poems about mental illness at least. But
Wow.
this is all going to be new poetry.
Have you ever published these poems and like maybe put them in a book?
I have 5 books on Amazon.
No way. Wait,
Uh,
I must have missed that. I must have missed that from the
I have 5 books under the name D.E. Walsh.
DE Walsh. Okay, okay. My apologies, Dale, for not, including that on in the introduction, but I will be sure to include that in the show notes.
Yep, yep.
Um Beautiful.
I'm planning on. I have another one ready to go. I'm just waiting for someone to do the cover. But my big project is the one that God just gave me, which is to explain through poetry for the masses schizophrenia.
Whoo, I felt that in my core. I think it is that calling for you.
I decided on my 10th birthday, Nick, I was going to be a writer. One of the ironies of my illness is it got me out of the rat race so I could devote myself to my writing. I didn't have to, go to work and do because I was disabled. But, that's just the thing is my calling is my writing, but also I feel the reason I got schizophrenia and the reason I've been able to like deal with it for so long and without dying or committing suicide or killing myself, or whatever, is that I just feel that that's my real calling is to be able to show people the possibilities of people coming out of severe mental illness and just like destroy the stigma that's so involved with mental illness.
Wow. A big round of applause to you, Dale. I love that. Thank you, Dale, for showing up and showing out every day. So we're gonna pivot to a self-worth question. Now, the self-worth question that I think best represent you today is this. Now, self-discovery is a journey that varies for each person. What are some practical steps individuals can take to embark on this path and learn about themselves?
Be aware of your thoughts. Uh, be aware. Well, be aware of yourself. Be aware of your thoughts. Um, cultivate a sense of self where you know you're valuable. I mean, this is one thing that I learned in my own journey with schizophrenia is sometimes you just can't believe what everybody's telling you. You gotta believe yourself.
Mm-hmm. You gotta believe in yourself. Okay. So, Dale, what is your heart's greatest wish?
My heart's greatest wish is a 7 bedroom, 5 bath, 2 kitchen mansion with a quarter mile of beach with a car garage with a Tesla, a Mercedes coupe, and a Ferrari on the Big Island of Hawaii.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Okay, that's a good one. Okay, if you have, okay, let me just rephrase this. Do you have a mantra that you live by besides recovery is not,
Well, that's
um,
just from my company. My real mantra is live a dale to dale existence. Go one dale at a time.
one day at a time? Okay, go one nick at a time.
Yeah, yeah. But
Okay.
but I don't know if you know the etymology of dale, but dale means valley. So
Oh,
ba-
I never
so
knew that.
basically so basically my best friend from Dartmouth was a philosophy major, and he visited me in New Jersey one time, and we're talking and everything. And he was really into Friedrich Nietzsche, who I like a lot too. But he summarized Nietzsche's philosophy by saying, "Make all your summits valleys." So that was his that was his like summary of Nietzsche's philosophy. So of course I changed that to make all your summits dales. And one thing that I figured out that
Go
one thing
one valley equivalent to Dale at a time.
right. But the other thing I figured out about revelations and the alpha and the omega is without a dale there can be no alpha and no omega. Because without a valley there can be no summits.
That's right. Woo! Yes, that was a good one. Okay, thank you. Okay, Dale, if you could create a quote right now for you to leave to the audience listening in the world as your legacy, what would it be?
Well, this is what I plan on putting on my gravestone.
Wow.
As he got
Epitaph?
older,
Wow.
yeah,
Okay,
as
you've
he
had it.
got older, he got better.
As you got over, you got better. Dale, you are such a wonderful person. Thank you so much for spending the time to share your story and being so open, transparent, and vulnerable with us. So, how can people reach out to you, Dale?
Okay, well, my website is www dot do DEW live love DWLIVELOVE.net. That's my website. And actually, probably the easiest way to get in touch. Well, I also have a Calendly link. So if you want a free consultation, whether it's about live love or whether it's just to like, I'm willing to talk to people and just like, see what they want to talk about. But it's Calendly, CALENDLY.com/Dale Coach 55. So that's where you can make a a Zoom appointment with me. And
Okay.
then on Instagram, I'm at Dale.Walsh.14. And on Facebook, I'm at Dale Walsh.
Awesome. Any last messages before we close this interview?
Well, I just want to say thank you very much for having me. It's been a great pleasure. I hope I've produced some value, and just thanks for very much for having me, and maybe we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I just want to say thank you too for coming out here and just being you, being authentically you. So thank you, Dale. And that is a wrap on today's inspiring episode with Dale E. Walsh. Thank you for the work that you do, Dale, to continue to uplift the world around you and yourself. Now, for our listeners, this has been Your Worthless. Read that again. The juxtaposition of your very soul. Now, if you've ever felt worthless, remember you are not alone. Your soul chose to be here to matter. And for that reason alone, you are worthy. A huge thank you to you again, Dale, and to all of you for listening. Until next time,
Thanks a lot.
thank you so much. Until next time, I am Nick Nieras. Keep shining, keep growing, and always remember you are worthy and you are enough. See you in the next episode. Thank you, Dale, for your time. Love this episode? Now, transformation doesn't end here. Head on to at holistic.lifestyle_with Nick. That is on my Instagram. Or head on to my website www.denigneraswholisticlifestyle.com for more info on my coaching framework, which is the Worthy, Authentic, and Abundant Framework, digital guides, and my upcoming events such as retreats and master classes and workshops. Now, I also do intuitive readings where we get to check on your soul path. And if you're also wanting to check on your energetic alignment, I have done that too. And I offer that kind of services. So, my question to you is, are you ready? Because I am. Let's make the most. Good evening to you, Dale. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Nick. How are you? Things in the weather in New Jersey's been pretty amazing. Last week was rainy and cold, but today we hit 85, and tomorrow we're in the 90s, I think.
Brilliant. Well, I am doing very well too. I am recording from Malaysia, all the way in Southeast Asia. It is 10:03 a.m. for me. So it's the morning, and I think it's about 27 in Celsius. It is hot and sunny. So Dale, I'd like to say thank you for saying yes to be interviewed. And I also would like to introduce myself to you formally and to all of our listeners tuning in for the first time and returning subscribers. My name is Nicolette, and I am the creator for the podcast titled You're Worthless. Read that again, the juxtaposition of your very soul. Now, today we're going to talk about schizophrenia. And this is a topic that I've had, I think, one friend in my entire life so far that has been diagnosed. And unfortunately, I think he took his own life. That was back in, I think, 15 years ago. And I never really understood why. And I think it's a full circle moment now that I'm podcasting. Even though I wasn't a podcaster before, I was in the corporate world. I've just been very grateful to have met incredible people on my show. So, Dale, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to all of our listeners. And then we can get down into our conversation.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on, and I hope I can bring some worth to your worthless podcast.
Indeed, you will. Okay. Hello, everyone. We have Dale E. Walsh with us. Dale is a coach for the families of those diagnosed with schizophrenia. He has been coaching these families for several years and is the creator of the LIVELOVE method to help his client. Now, that's all in capital letters, LIVELOVE. He is guided by the mantra, recovery is always an option. Following a 13-week hospitalization after being extracted from Dartmouth College in 1975, he was in a private psychiatric program where he was hospitalized 9 times over 5 years. Diagnosed 50 years ago, Dale has been episode-free for the past 32. His mental health journey has evolved from total psychosis to a miraculous recovery. He has lived independently for 40 years. Wow, Dale, welcome to the show.